This is The Obscura Dossier, Episode 4, Thin Ice. Police Statement of Willem Ryckhart given March 12th, 2021, regarding an unusual experience during a solo geological survey of Mount Anastae. Statement begins. My name is Willem Ryckhart. I've worked in topographic survey and field cartography for over 20 years. Most of my assignments are through the National Geospatial Institute, although I've taken a few private commissions. Land development proposals, environmental impact reports, that sort of thing. My specialization is alpine terrain, glacial movement, rock face erosion, microclimate charting. I work alone, not out of preference necessarily, but because field teams are expensive and the work is usually too remote to justify the cost. I'm used to it. You learn to rely on your instruments, your preparation, and your instincts. And if you do it long enough, you start to trust the terrain itself. Not in some mystical way, just in that you've come to know it like you'd know an old house, every crack, every creek. Mount Anastae is part of the Cordillera subrange. Not well known, not particularly dangerous, but isolated. It doesn't see much traffic outside of specialists like myself. I've mapped it extensively since 2014. Dozens of expeditions, seasonal comparisons, weathering logs, glacial core samples. I could draw the entire northern face from memory down to the crevice cluster at 2,860 meters. That's why when an anomaly turned up in a recent LiDAR pass, minor inconsistencies in slope grade, half a meter off at most, I agreed to go. It was likely an error, maybe some unmapped subsidence or refraction glitch. I wasn't too concerned. It was supposed to be a 2-day climb. Light pack, no tent, just a bivy sack and basic supplies. I didn't tell anyone beyond my supervisor. Standard protocol. I'd done this route before. There were no risks I hadn't already accounted for. The first day was uneventful. The weather held, visibility was good. I reached my intended waypoint just before nightfall, on schedule. I set up camp beneath the western outcrop, recorded my logs, and slept. In the morning, I ascended towards the shelf where the anomaly had been tagged. Just above the ridge, near a familiar resting ledge I'd used before. I remember thinking how still everything was. No wind, no shifting ice, just silence. Not unusual, exactly, but I suppose it only stands out in hindsight. What I found up there should not have been possible. I reached the shelf around 10:40 in the morning. The approach was narrow, hemmed in by steep scree on one side and a sheer drop to the other, but manageable. I'd been there before, more than once, and there'd never been anything unusual about it. But this time, there was something new. Set into the rock about 10 meters ahead of where the paths level off was a metal hatch. Circular, about a meter wide, flat, black, matte, no rust, no wear. Perfectly symmetrical. Like it had been machined yesterday. There was no frame, no welding, no screws or bolts. Just the hatch. Embedded into the mountainside. Flush with the stone like it had always been there. I stopped walking. It took me a few seconds to really register what I was looking at. I'd surveyed this exact area dozens of times. There had never been a hatch, nothing artificial, no indication of subsurface infrastructure, no seismic anomalies, no material echoes from the usual subsurface scans. It shouldn't have been there. I approached cautiously, not out of fear. Curiosity, mostly. I thought perhaps it was a private installation of some kind, hidden observatory equipment, maybe. The Institute sometimes leases high-altitude zones to defense contractors, though rarely without documentation. I stood on the rock face, directly in front of it. There were no markings, no latches, just a single thin handle built into the surface. I didn't touch it. It was as I was about to turn around and leave that the stone beneath me gave way. There was no warning. One moment I was standing, the next the rock crumbled like dry plaster. I dropped fast, 5, maybe 6 meters, hit something hard, bounced, then slid further, my pack scraping behind me. It wasn't a vertical fall, more like a controlled slide, but steep and fast enough that I couldn't stop myself. When I landed, it was with enough force to knock the breath from my lungs. I lay there for a few minutes, stunned. Cold stone beneath me, thin air, the sound of nothing. When I sat up, I realized I was inside something. It was a shaft, cylindrical, maybe 15 meters deep, perfectly smooth. The walls were polished, stone or metal, I couldn't immediately tell. The hatch I'd seen was now closed far above me, cutting off the sky. A faint circular outline was all that remained, like the iris of a camera lens. There was no ladder, no footholds, no seams, just a blank, vertical wall enclosing me on all sides. I was trapped. I ran through the checklist. First thing, injuries. I'd landed hard, but nothing broken. Bruised, winded, some scrapes on my forearms from the rock face. No head trauma, no spinal pain. I could move, and my pack had stayed mostly intact. Second, assess the environment. The space was narrow, just wide enough to extend my arms. The shaft walls were cold, slightly damp, and strangely smooth. Not metal, not quite stone either. Something synthetic, maybe composite? I couldn't place it. Above me, the hatch was closed. No visible seams, no mechanism, no external handle. Just a blank disc 15 meters up. I tried the radio first. Dead. No static. No burst of signal, just silence. I cycled through bands manually. Nothing. I checked the battery. Full. Next I tried the sat beacon. It lit up, blinked once, and then powered down. I repeated it. Same result. It was like something was interfering or blocking. That's when I shouted. Just once at first, then louder. Repeatedly. My voice bounced oddly off the shaft. It echoed, but not like it should have. Like it was curving away from me. Pulled somewhere deeper. Dampened too quickly. I tried using the emergency flare, the kind meant to mark locations for air retrieval. I aimed it straight up, it fired, sparked, and fizzled out about halfway, like it had hit an invisible ceiling. I rationed my food and water. Enough for maybe 4 days if I stretched it. No natural airflow, no condensation. The air wasn't stale exactly, but unmoving. I started conserving breath without meaning to. Shorter inhales, listening. After the first full day, I tried climbing. It was pointless. The walls weren't just smooth, they resisted grip. Not frictionless, but enough to make every foothold fail. Like the material absorbed momentum. I tried using my pitons. No purchase. They didn't even scratch the surface, just slipped off with a dull click, like tapping against glass submerged in oil. That was when I realized it wasn't a natural formation, and I started to wonder if I'd fallen at all. I slept in 15-minute intervals, woke up constantly. The dark didn't change. The light from my headlamp never reached more than a few meters before dulling unnaturally, like it was being swallowed. The silence became a texture. Not absence of sound, just something that sat on my skin like dust, like static waiting for signal. By what I estimate was the start of the third day, I noticed the hole. I don't believe it appeared suddenly, more likely I simply hadn't seen it. It was set just above eye level, maybe 6 feet off the floor of the shaft. Circular, no more than the width of a clenched fist. The kind of thing your gaze might slide past a dozen times before it registers. It let in no light. When I shone my headlamp towards it, the beam simply stopped. It didn't pass through. It didn't reflect. It was like the hole swallowed the light whole, leaving the edges sharp but the interior blank. It looked out, or perhaps inward, I wasn't sure. And for reasons I still can't fully explain, I didn't lean in to look. Not then. Not right away. I started paying more attention to the hole as the days passed. It wasn't a void or an abyss. When I pressed my eye close, I could see outside beyond the shaft. There was the horizon, a silver pale sky, jagged mountain ridges, the faint outlines of distant forests. I was very high up, far higher than I had intended. The sight should have been a relief, a reminder of where I was, but instead it deepened the isolation. The world was there, just beyond my reach, small and silent. The whispers came not from the hole, but from below. The floor of the shaft, soft at first, almost like wind threading through cracks in stone, but unplaceable. They had no clear source. The voices were fragmented and indistinct, like many voices layered together, but no single word or language. Then the tapping began. At first, slow and tentative, like a cautious knock on a door. It grew steadily, more rhythmic. It was almost coming from the floor beneath me, but I couldn't find the origin. The sound seemed too steady to be random, too deliberate to be accidental. The whispers swelled with the tapping, rising in volume and urgency, pressing against the edges of my sanity. They were louder than before, sharp, insistent, like the breath of something waiting. On the final day, driven by a mix of dread and stubborn curiosity, I pressed my eye once again to the hole. What I saw was me. But not as I was. The reflection was twisted, eyes sunken and dark, mouth pulled tight in a frozen grimace. The skin was pallid, almost translucent. Veins like black threads visible beneath the face stared back at me with something inhuman. A silent scream trapped behind the eyes. I recoiled, startled so violently that I lost my footing, fell back and struck my head against the wall. Everything went dark after that. I don't know how long I was unconscious after hitting my head. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed. Bright lights, antiseptic smells, the constant beeping of machines. They told me I was found days later, 10 kilometers down the mountainside, barefoot and incoherent. No equipment, no pack, nothing. Like I'd wandered down, lost in a daze. I had severe frostbite and hypothermia. My body was close to failing. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. My eyes were damaged. Burned, they said. Like I'd stared into a sun that wasn't there. I'm not blind, not completely, but my vision is forever altered. Blurred in places, light sensitive, sometimes painfully raw. Since then, I've never set foot on a mountain again. The heights that used to feel like home are now a place I avoid. I don't know what I saw through that hole. I don't want to know. Statement ends. No evidence of the hatch was ever found. Coordinates provided by Mr. Ryckhart correspond to a sheer, featureless cliff face. No opening, no structure, no indication that anyone could have accessed the area without extensive climbing gear, none of which was recovered. His 2019 topographical records, however, contained one unexplained entry, a perfectly circular depression noted at 3,040 meters. The file is now corrupted. The coordinates show only rock, nothing else. Hospital records show no evidence of Mr. Ryckhart ever being admitted or treated at the facility where he allegedly recovered. His manager confirmed that he frequently hiked in the mountain region, but noted there were no registered hikes or expeditions on the dates corresponding to the timeline given in the statement. What's more, since this statement was recorded, only a few months later, Mr. Ryckhart was found dead in his home. The mortuary report stated that his eyes had been burned out, leaving empty black pits where they once were. Even stranger, part of his brain, the hippocampus, was missing. The hippocampus is critical for memory formation and spatial navigation, which may explain Mr. Ryckhart's fragmented recollections and disorientation. The circumstances surrounding his death remain under investigation. This case has been classified as Anomaly Code U-4729-Alpha. Classification: unknown/communicative vessel. Status: active/unconfirmed. Priority: unknown. End recording. This is The Obscure Dossier, written and presented by K.W. Krieger. Thank you for listening. Until next time.